Hi, it's Hella from Dawn Emporium, and this time kind of a big video about Barnardos, and yeah, just about Barnardos. It's a fun one. It's taken me a while to get it all together. So let's go right back to the beginning and where it all started. It was founded by Thomas John Barnardo in 1866. Originally known as the National Incorporated Association for the Reclamation of Destitute Waif Children, it was actually a groundbreaking idea, especially with its open door policy, so no child was ever turned away, because a lot of places did turn children away for religious grounds, skin colour, any excuse really. Even for some, it was if your parents drank, they could turn you away. That was just what it was like. Certain almshouses, things like that. He opened a school in the East End of London to care for and educate children left orphaned and destitute by a cholera outbreak. In 1870, he founded a boys' orphanage, later opening a girls' home. I can't find the date for when that actually opened. He died in 1905, leaving a network of 96 homes caring for 8,500 children. His work was then carried on under the name Dr. Barnardo's Homes National Incorporated Association. Bit of a mouthful, he was never a doctor. From the mid-20th century, the charity moved from children's homes to fostering and adoption, changing its name yet again in 1965 to the rather shorter Dr. Barnardo's. Its last traditional orphanage closed in 1988, and it changed its name for the fourth time to the current Barnardos and dropped the illegitimate doctor. Controversy has always gone hand in hand with Barnardos, so let's get into the earliest forms. He was accused of kidnapping children from their parents. He was also accused of falsifying photographs of children to make them look even more bedraggled and poor before finding aid at his homes. Now, the falsifying photographs sounds a bit strange in the modern world, but at the same time it's not. We get it these days mainly with animal shelters. What they do is they take a photo as they walk through the door. It was actually intended to be in the first 3 odd days, and then after they'd had a bath and a change of clothes. So there they'd be looking like a street urchin, then looking like they were ready, well, for street urchin church, not exactly upper class church, but they'd be in better clothes than they'd have had a wash. However, what he'd actually do is they'd come through the door, they'd be in fairly decent set of clothes, you know, nothing that you'd want to get married in, but, you know, something that you could wear, especially in that day and age. And what he'd do is he'd stick them in some rags, put some coal dust on them for added effect, and go, look at these poor waifs and strays, take photos of them. And then you could buy postcards or even little booklets of postcards to make money for the charity. Yeah. Because that's morally just. Well, apparently it was. In one picture, 3 siblings of Caribbean parentage were posed naked except for Hessian bags. Their father, a sailor and ship's cook, had died saving another man who had gone overboard, leaving their mother, a seamstress, to care for them alone. Although she tried, she couldn't make ends meet and made the heartbreaking decision to give her children over to Barnardos for their own good. That's when the shocking picture was taken, even though they actually had clothes. So these 3 children, their parents were from, I think one was from Jamaica and one was from Antigua. I think the dad was Jamaican and the mum was Antiguan. They'd moved to England because of the dad's job. And the mum was a seamstress, as the dad was going around sailing, doing his job as a cook. He had died saving somebody else. What a hero. And the mother had then tried, there is more about this online, had tried and tried to keep the family together, but being a seamstress didn't pay the best anyway. She had 4 mouths to feed, a roof to keep over their head. Not only that, she wasn't white. So she wasn't getting the same pay as a white mother would get in that situation. How charming. Now, you can say that's supposition, because in no writing about that case does it say, oh, she was paid less because she happened to have less chance of skin cancer. However, written accounts at the time are quite clear that white was right. It is pretty much the way pay went. And it wasn't the highest paying job. It was a good job for a woman, but it wasn't the highest paying job. You couldn't sit there with your 3 kids in a nice little place down in Soho on the pay of a seamstress. So she tried. She failed. She gave them over. And again, I think it's because of their skin coloration, he put them in sacks. Nice. That was the worst bit of publicity that I can find documented anywhere. Nobody actually really cared about this until it was dug up later, by the way, because let's face it, they were Caribbean parentage. They didn't actually matter at the time. They were more upset about white children looking bad. He was taken to court 88 times, mainly for kidnapping. But as he was such a charismatic and popular man, he was largely believed and his reputation remained intact. Other charges brought against him include neglecting the basic hygiene for the children in his care. So, yeah, sounds a lovely guy. Now, we're on to the next big scandal, the Colonisation Scandal. This one takes up a while. Between 1945 and 1974, children in Barnardos care were exported to Australia. Hang on a minute. Most have horrific stories of physical, psychological and sexual abuse and neglect. But colonisation started long before and numbers vary wildly. According to the iicsa.org.uk website, post-1885 and pre-1945, 30,022 children were sent to Canada and 2,342 children were sent to Australia. Only 442 children were sent to Australia in the years 1945 to 74. Wikipedia says the post-war exportation of children is 150,000. They did this for both practical and idealistic reasons. It helped with their overcrowding, it kept the open door policy running, was a cheaper way of maintaining the children, and helped to populate the empire, because the empire comes before all else. In both Canada and Australia, the children were expected to earn their keep as agricultural labourers and domestic workers on farms. Children aged 14 plus were emigrated. Some had been told their families were dead, others that their families didn't love them, yet others were tempted with promotional material about their destination before being given a physical examination by the Department of Immigration and Colonisation officers who conducted the selection. Applications, questionnaires and home checks were carried out on prospective farmers in Canada pre-World War II, but I can't find out if this happened during that time span in Australia. Post-war, I know it did. However, in a memo from 1963, the Deputy General for the UK Management Committee, 1, expressed concerns that the superintendents and executive officers would not have information about children after they had gone to Australia. 2. Noted that the Migration Department did not have the capacity to read the lengthy, I've lost my folder, reports received on each child from Australia, except in a few instances where actions at this end were called for, such that the general principle of continuity and concern for the individual child was not operating in its migration work, and 3. Accepted that consideration of the reports would help create greater confidence in our migration policy. So basically they went to Australia, they lost them, and only in a small number of cases did they even read who was coming over, care who was coming over, or send back reports about who was actually over. Sorry, Australia. And Canada, because no doubt it happened in Canada. Right. Here's some child abuse accusations regarding the colonisation scheme. In the 1800s in Canada, in or before 1889, Alfred Owen, who ran the receiving home in Canada, was convicted of sexual interference with girls in his care. Barnardos sent out a female senior manager to investigate the facilities. A recommendation was made that locks should be put on bedroom doors and chaperones provided for when the girls were in vulnerable situations. At Pigton, Australia, 1955, a housemaster was dismissed on the grounds of suspicion of indiscreet fondling of boys at the school. It's not known if Barnardos UK knew of the incident at this time, but his dismissal suggests Barnardos Australia took a dim view of the mere suspicion of abuse. A house guide at the time suggests that the same would have happened if it had happened in the UK. We'll get into that later. Pigton and Normanhurst, 1958. There's 2 different homes, as you see. I've already mentioned Pigton. Again, Australia. In May 1958, a man called Tom Price raised concerns that 23 boys, mainly aged 18 to 21, were potential victims of serious sexual malpractices at Pigton by a former sportsmaster, 2 poultry farmers, a Barnardos old boy, a herd testing officer, 2 former housemasters, including the one dismissed 3 years prior at Pigton, in abuse spanning several years. We know Barnardos UK became aware of these allegations. What happened next was something quite bizarre. The migration programme stopped for a while, completely put the anchors on. Barnardos UK officials went over to Australia to try and sort out their homes. A lot of the staff that were under suspicion of child abuse were arrested for crimes unrelated to the children's homes, thus getting them off the streets and saving Barnardos' honour. The Australian most senior civil servant within the Commonwealth Immigration Department, I can't say that when I'm sober, let alone when I'm drunk, asked Barnardos to increase their child migrant numbers, and by August 1958 they were all back up and running, reputation intact. So basically these people had had abuse allegations made against them, mainly about the Pigton house. Some of them had also worked at Normanhurst, but it was mainly about the Pigton house. And instead of getting them done for child abuse in relation to the Barnardos care home, what they actually did was they got the police to deep dive and get them done for anything else they could, unrelated to the children and the children's home and Barnardos, so Barnardos still looked fine. Yeah. Now, I can't find any written evidence or testimonials about female victims at all, either first or third person accounts, but Barnardos stopped the migration of girls aged 13 to 17 post-war because of problems of isolation and vulnerability, even though they had their first reports of sexual abuse from Canada in the 1880s. What I do know is that a lot of these children found themselves regularly beaten, raped and otherwise abused upon finding themselves in these new countries, often alone, terrified and being worked ragged. Now, Jim Loach, son of Ken Loach, has made a film about their plight called Oranges and Sunshine, came out in 2011. There was also another film that's older because I remember it, probably late 90s, but I can't actually find the title of the film. It's about a girl moving over post-World War II. That's another good one, but Oranges and Sunshine is a good film to watch, just in case you want the cinematic experience. Now, foster home care. This is the UK, Canada, Australia. As an awesome bit. Now, overall, this is a muddy area. I'm going to be honest, because foster homes, you're living with a family mainly. So, I don't have much an account of this, apart from I do have a son's testimonial as to what happened to his mother, which I'll be reading shortly. And these are about what happened in England. In Canada and Australia, I can find claims of rape, sexual abuse, physical and mental abuse, overworking, underfeeding and more, but can't actually find any testimonials. Nobody has actually written what has happened. You can actually find more from people getting date raped online than what you can from people who have been through the Barnardos system. In Ireland, I can find sexual abuse and rape claims. In Scotland, there were even accusations that a fire had been set to eradicate evidence of abuse being carried out in Barnardos properties. I can find Barnardos being sued for letting children go into families that were unsuitable, thus causing child-on-child abuse to happen because they didn't pass on reports. Yeah, apparently a boy and his sister were both adopted into a family with a younger child, and the boy allegedly, I can only find the start of the case, not what happened at the end of the case, he started abusing the younger child that had already been adopted by the family, and this went on for a number of years, causing the younger child, a daughter referred to as HL10, to go through the ringer and then later bring a case up to Barnardos because they knew that this boy should not be left around younger children, and they just didn't pass on the report at all. Not to, he was from one area, we'll say that he's from up north. He was being placed with a southern family. Up north didn't pass on the information to the southern social workers, and the southern social workers couldn't pass it on to the parents, so they had no idea that there were any problems up north and that this was a known problem, that he shouldn't be around younger children. So they just decided to abuse by default, basically, on that one. Basically, wherever I look, I can find different kinds of abuse on display, and even Barnardos' legal counsel calling people liars in court, and the police taking no interest upon being told of allegations, and a society-wide ignorance in the face of facts policy, but I cannot find people, unless you know somebody who's been through it, I cannot find people actually writing up their own accounts of what they went through, which is actually really weird. In this modern day and age, it is really weird. I have people that I know that are in their 60s and 70s, and you can literally read their life stories because they blog it or vlog it. The fact that these people aren't doing it says just how deeply damaging this is. Right, now, as I say, I know somebody whose mother went through the Barnardos system. So he's told me about it. Now, I knew quite a bit about it anyway. He's given me more of a timeline as to what happened and more of a family-wide view on what happened and how Barnardos affected the entire family. So I'm going to read that to you now. The bit that I forgot to mention is she almost got shipped off somewhere, the mum did. She didn't realise it at the time, but yeah. My mum was one of 11 siblings. Her dad died from a work-related injury. He was a bin man, so it was probably septicemia or gangrene. Her mum couldn't cope with all the kids. She managed to pass 6 kids off on family, and 5 went into Barnardos care because it was the closest thing to modern social services then. It was the early 1940s. All 5 kids got split up. My mum ended up in a foster home in East Anglia. Her foster mum was awful. She'd neglect my mum and make her work for her clothes Barnardos had already paid for, like school uniforms, and kept a drawer full of brand new, pristine clothing that she'd waft under the woman from Barnardos' nose to prove that she was a good foster parent, but wouldn't let my mum wear. It all got too much for my mum, and she eventually gave her foster mother a good hiding and told her to stop beating and being abusive to her, or she'd really hurt her. Like most bullies, after that she backed off. Barnardos and her foster mum didn't like my mum getting an education, either because she's a woman, she didn't need it. They didn't like the fact she got into grammar school or getting A-levels. She got offered a job on the phone exchange in London, and because she refused to live in a Barnardos hostel, they told her she'd become a whore. That's nice. They'd given her a suitcase like the ones that you always see in photos of evacuees and demanded it back because of her rebellion, so she threw it at them. Meanwhile, she had it good. One of her brothers was sent to a boys' school where he was sexually abused. He never recovered. 2 other brothers turned to dodgy dealings and low-level crime to survive. All had varying levels of lifelong depression. None of the siblings truly trusted each other or anyone else, and each one was scarred by their time in Barnardos care. After years of pestering by one of her brothers, she went to Barnardos to get it investigated. They gave her the records and a verbal apology, then offered to prosecute her foster mother, even though by this point she was long dead. Mum's gone on to have a good life. She spent a long time as an English-French translator and has been married to my dad for years and was an excellent mum to me and my brother. The scars are still there to this day, though, and so is the grudge against Barnardos. Now, this lady also was fed the promotional bump about wherever, I think it was Australia, and for whatever reason she wasn't sent. I think it was her rebellious nature. Even to this day she's rebellious. She's awesome, but she's rebellious. So she was, depending on which way you look at it, she was actually quite lucky. Now, that's the end of that bit. I told you this was a long one. Now we're up to the most modern controversy. about Barnardos, which is Cedars. The Cedars Immigration Detention Centre housed families set for deportation from the UK. It opened in 2011 and closed permanently in December 2016. It had 9 individual apartments which could accommodate up to 6 people each. Families could move around the building's interior at all times, the outside space in daylight hours, and go off-site with a staff escort. It had a fitness centre, play areas for children, lounges, a cafe and dining area, a library, a prayer room, a computer room, recreational activities, healthcare, counselling, therapy, ministerial services. Families were meant to spend a maximum of 3 days in Cedars care, rising to 7 days if ministerial authorisation was granted. It sounds pretty heavenly for families getting deported, right? G4S, the country's largest security company, and Barnardos were supposed to work together to make the journey home as painless and easy as possible. Not always easy after a 6 a.m. wake-up call by immigration officers ripping you out of your bed. Here's a bit on how it went, and with a lot of credit to Open Democracy, because I got a lot of the information from there. So, partnering with G4S in the immigration business, obviously, it shouldn't be called a business except if you're making money by partnering with the country's largest security firm to make them look more ethical. Oh, then it's a business. What happened was the then coalition government of 2010 abolished child detention centres. They worked with Barnardos and G4S to make a family-friendly pre-departure accommodation instead. Managed by G4S, it was basically a pretty-fine detention centre in collusion with Barnardos that led to mass moral outrage, picketing of Barnardos charity shops, a leafleting campaign, an occupation of the Barnardos Barkingside headquarters, and a disrupted concert at the Royal Albert Hall. Anyone else think people were a little bit touchy? The charity were there to do what they apparently do best, which is provide welfare and social work services to some of the most vulnerable children in the UK at a place called Cedars, which stands for Compassion, Empathy, Dignity, Approachability, Respect and Support. Which is, yeah, as usual, they just fly off the mark slightly though, because it's Barnardos and they're good at that. It apparently wasn't a detention centre, even though it was operated by UK Visas and Immigration Control. Security and maintenance staff were all G4S employees, was adjacent to the Gatwick Airport, with Barnardos supplying social workers and child welfare, welfare services, except they kind of didn't. According to an article in The Guardian, dated April 2014, families were split up for non-compliant behaviour, which they then stated in a report, as a child welfare organisation, this concerns us as we do not think a family split should be used for affecting immigration enforcement. If they were there specifically for social work and child welfare services, they would have raised hell to stop this, not just been concerned. According to another article by Children and Young People Now in March 2015, parental separation over non-compliant behaviour was happening to 1 in 6 families. Now, as you'd expect in a security firm best known for the death of a man scheduled for deportation back to Angola in 2010, whose name was Jimmy Mabenga, excessive force was also a major problem at Cedars, including one case that gets touched upon in their reports, but more broadly in the media, where excessive force was used against a pregnant woman in Cedar's care. I even found passing notes that adults and children in Cedar's care didn't get immunisations that adults would have got before deportation because they fell into a loophole that meant they didn't qualify for them. So we were sending them, we were sending them home to die twice over, depending on where we were sending them. Apparently because it was a pre-departure accommodation centre and not an immigration department's departure centre, they weren't under the same rules. I thought they were pretty much the same thing, but apparently not. What makes this worse is Barnardos' own guidelines, or red lines as they called them, that they set out for the project were pretty clear. They were pledging to speak out if a family stayed more than once or for over a week, and to withdraw from the contract if this happened more than twice, to speak out if disproportionate force was used or it had serious concerns over staff behaviour, and to withdraw from the contract if these issues weren't addressed once raised. Now, I think it's fair to say that they failed with their red lines on multiple levels, but they did have some success in the Cedars ventures. HM Inspector of Prisons and others testified that Barnardos' presence lessened the immediate violence and reduced levels of stress and distress for both children and parents in detention. What's prison? No, I'm not going there. They also supported some G4S staff in getting diplomas in childcare, but only have one known case of stopping a child being removed from her mother's care. And frankly, they had to turn around and say she's fit for child exploitation. That's why we don't want her removed. So that pretty much says how murky things are when you're sitting there saying, you can't remove this child for any reason because we think you're going to sell her into slavery. There were attempted suicides, repeated detentions of families, disproportionate force used fairly regularly, it says. From what I can find, breaking families up was quite literally an alternative to the naughty step. Accusations of people falling through loopholes and so not getting proper medical care afforded to others in their situation. And Barnardos literally tearing up their own rather vaguely written rulebook. And now we're here in modern times. After Cedars closed in 2016, Barnardos finally withdrew from future immigration contracts, leaving G4S to run them alone. And what a joy for the detainees that'll be. And I wonder what the next scandal will be. The great thing is, the Cedars have made it sound like such a dark and murky place. A load of children, well, they closed it because apparently enough people weren't going through to make it a profitable venture for the government, but that's because a load of children were actually being treated as adults and being put into adult detainment. That's nice. And now, of course, they're not running that, so where are these families going now? This year's RAF base is to die of COVID last time I checked, personally. I mean, I'm sorry. The whole history of Barnardos is one scandal after another. Literally stealing children off the street just because, oh, you look like a street urchin, come here, child. I need to take a few photos of you and then steal you from your parents. And then I'm going to send you to a foreign country because we don't want the natives there. We want white people because the empire. it's basically how it goes. And don't mind the abuse. Just don't mind the abuse, because you're going to get that anyway. Yes, lots of abuse. And if you get willingly handed over because we don't have a working social services at the moment, that's okay as well. Because abuse, it's normal. Honest. What do you mean that we've wrecked your entire life? There were stories at one point of Barnardos doing enforced sterilisations, but I couldn't find any, how would you put it, decent sources for that. I do remember it on a television interview when I was younger, but I couldn't find any written documentation for that. But that doesn't surprise me if that did happen, because abuse, it's part of the system. And then, oh yes, we'll help out with immigrant children going home because they were running from abuse. So we're going to send them back to abuse via some abuse, or with a side order of abuse, because Barnardos. Yeah. I think, to be honest, if I worked for Barnardos, I would actually put all the money into helping disadvantaged children via other means. I would have nothing directly to do with children. No fostering. There's enough fostering, well, ways to foster. Private fostering agencies seem to be everywhere. Because I've been looking into Barnardos, about every 5th advert I am getting on my phone at the minute is, what do you foster for? Did you know you can foster? Do you know how much money you can make fostering? So I'm trying to get rid of my own children. I don't need any more. You know, one of them's getting to that age now where I'm about to get the broom out at her. Come on, you can move out now. Go, shoo. Obviously, I'm not like that, but, you know, it's fun to put images in people's heads. Mother of the Year. But there's so many agencies as well as social services that you can foster through. Why do you need them? Where are they putting these children when you're, you know, if you're fostering through them? What they could actually do is put the money that they're making into youth groups, into college courses for underprivileged children, into uniform exchanges in poor areas, because the amount of children who are just buying a blazer at the moment around here, every school needs a blazer, and you are looking at between £35 and £45 for an overblown jacket. Why not have Barnardos run something so when your kid runs out you can like swap it, something, you know, something like that. But no, they don't think like that, because that doesn't make enough money. Doing groundwork things doesn't make enough money. What you need to do is make it look like you're rehoming children, even though you have been nothing but a big ball of controversy since day dot, and it's all there. They are actually quite open now about their early controversies, but you have to go searching for specific stories. And like I say, nobody is actually talking openly about this. If you're lucky, I didn't really touch on the Irish stories, because you can get more from them. Their newspapers, when somebody speaks up in court, they will write out more of the transcription. In England, what you'll tend to get is, oh, Miss X said that she was abused under so-and-so's care between the years of 1973 and 1978. Whereas in Ireland, it will be, Miss X said Mr. B beat her with a baton several times, and I don't know, I don't know, underfed her, and things that would actually go into the details. I don't know why, but Irish reporting is good for that. But I'm saving those stories for something else later. So don't think I've forgotten about you. I haven't. But I am having real trouble to find actual people's stories. You can write these stories anonymously. People need to know what was going on, which is why I'm doing this stuff, because a little bit of a warrior thing going on, because I'm fed up of hearing these stories, just a dribble at a time, and then going, why does nobody talk about this? It's beyond me. People need to know. You know, they do. They need to know. It's just... people are still giving money to them thinking that they're a good cause. Well, they've literally let security guards beat up pregnant women, rip families apart. And I'm only talking a few years ago. We're in 2021 now, so 5 years ago they were doing all this. And then they just stopped, which I'm not sure if that's better or worse. Because now what's happening? They've got security guards who know nothing more than anger. You know, I know lots of security guards, and they can be lovely, lovely people, but a lot of them are just angry. That's why they went into the job. So they're calm at home. You know, they'll be the most chill people when they're not at work, and then when they are at work, the slightest thing goes wrong and suddenly they've got horns and a pitchfork. You don't want that around people who are already afraid. And these people are going to react badly. Like I say, they get ripped out of their bed at stupid o'clock in the morning. Some of them aren't even allowed to go back for a few days to get a decent set of clothes. What is that about? It shouldn't be allowed. You know? I don't know who in this country thinks that's a good idea, but I hope you got good sleeping pills. I sleep well. Anyway, I'm going. Have fun. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Know your power. And sorry for the stupidly long video here, but sometimes things need saying. And sometimes they're not pretty. The other long one that I'm working on at the minute, I'm going to have to redact it because it makes this one look small. Sorry. All right then. Ta-da. Bye.